encountered some kind of a glitch.
We could not leave the disaster piece that was AC Unity without taking a look at the Dead Kings DLC, Ubisoft's apology letter to its fanbase for deliberately releasing its main series next-gen release in a totally broken state just because they thought that people would accept it and they could patch it later a 17th time. In the spirit of even-handedness, the content that you do get for free is one of Ubisoft's big-budget DLCs, and rather than just being a linear set of missions that tacks on another 2 hours of playtime, Ubisoft went big with the Dead Kings and essentially gave everybody an entirely new sandbox that, if you're one of those mad people, will easily hand you another 10 hours of content to do everything on the map, new side quest missions, collectibles, and the main mission itself. Thankfully, in spite of the Dead Kings calling itself the next chapter of Arno's saga after the end of the main game, Ubisoft, surprisingly, didn't have the gall to put in a canonical ending as DLC, even though it was free. The problem was that while the content is quality, long, and involving, it's also pretty damn dense in the worst way possible. It's a huge amount of content, but none of it is really interesting enough to bother with, like in the main game that gave you the rare, cool Paris side mission, and the murder mysteries, and the actual plot of the game running through the main campaign is so flimsy and unoriginal that you would think it was literally the last step of development for this expansion. The gist is that the Marquis de Sade summons Arno to the pub in order to discuss a letter leading to a Templar conspiracy involving some sort of hidden artifact or map under the area's tombs. The patrons laugh at Arno and the Marquis since the tombs are apparently haunted and cursed. Arno takes the job and begins spelunking in the monastery network underneath France. This is huge. Glowing problem number one of the Dead Kings is that the DLC introduces underground parkour, which somehow fails harder in concept form than the main game's indoor parkour, because the entrances to get around the monasteries are poorly drawn on the map. You can barely tell which entrances lead to what you're actually looking for. Some of the entrances are in amazingly stupid places, and this just leads to a confusing bunch of commutes for Arno running around the sandbox trying to figure out where the actual mission is. And the mission in of itself is about as dull and stupid as COD Infinite Warfare. Arno's essentially looking for a magic artifact left behind by a long-dead assassin in his tomb, and the entire point of the DLC was that it was Ubisoft's attempt to be scary and creepy, and somehow, surprisingly, failed amazingly badly since they thought that they could accomplish horror elements by setting half the game underground. Unless you are a literal virgin to all media in general, underground crypts are not going to scare you by themselves, because the game offers none of the claustrophobic level design that would make dicking around underground nerve-wracking, and none of the monsters, enemies, or set pieces of the level convey anything beyond years of dust and piles of dirt. The DLC itself is literally called Dead Kings, which would imply ghosts and shit, but all the enemies of the game are the same random dickheads you've been failing to kill from Unity, and the ghosts only come into things right at the end of the game in a puzzle and could have been replaced wholesale by just glowing statues. Personally, what Dead Kings offered to me as an experience was a low, throbbing headache. Yeah, headache is what I meant. Nailed that take. Anywho, the big bad guy of the DLC, the ultimate villain, is a named faceless douchebag guy working for Napoleon, and even the game itself labels Captain Rose, yes, he is actually a man, as an idiot and a lowest common denominator soldier. He's on the same level as a schlubby mercenary who kills his underlings for no good reason and somehow ends up worse off. Honestly, Captain Blackman, or whoever he was from Battlefield 3, was a less generic character than this waste of code. It's not like Napoleon couldn't have been in this DLC at least doing something, since they already had the model and voice actor. Beyond the stupid vault opening puzzle that involved a lot of odd Zelda-inspired fire lighting, the only thing of note in the hunt for the key for the artifact was what was actually found: the head of St. Dinas. I sort of paid attention to the cutscenes, and the legend of the artifact is that St. Dinas was a patron saint who was decapitated, yet reportedly was able to get up, take his head with him, and walk off to where he would be buried, collapsing. Apparently St. Dinas was actually magic, and his head allows Arno to rip off Ezio one final time and essentially acts as a less stupid version of the Apple of Eden Ezio used as a weapon. Then Arno murders his way out of the crypt and leaves Franciade. The Dead Kings DLC is almost the perfect companion piece for Unity, as it too is meandering, nonsensical, with little redeeming features. The reason for it even starting in the first place is such a bargain basement cutscene that it was probably pulled from some random coder's ass in the last weeks of development. The DLC totally squanders the namesake of its expansion, and instead of actually implementing horror elements and ghosts and spirits, they just decide to pay lip service to the idea and have a tiny bit of supernatural things happen deep in the catacombs, while the rest of the DLC was basically Arno running around in circles looking for clues on the vault, the keys to the vault, and the puzzle to reveal the keyhole, all of the activities preceded by boring-ass commutes all over the frankly huge sandbox of the DLC, only made worse off by the fact that the catacombs of the game aren't all connected with each other and are a royal pain in the brain to navigate and leave. And then there's the crux of the game's plot resting on Arno being peer pressured by an 8-year-old kid into giving a shit about the world falling to the Templars and getting that artifact, and then he spends the next 2 missions checking in with this kid to get his approval. Strangely, the kid is pretty well equipped to help out and gather information, and that's because his ultimate aspiration seems to be becoming Arno Dorian. While the Dead Kings can offer you hours and hours of new missions and objectives with Unity, and it is free, you would have nearly the same experience as playing the Dead Kings as you would totally ignoring it. I'd call the campaign of Dead Kings bare bones, but that's an insult to all skeletons everywhere. Even the characters that are exclusive to this campaign only barely care about keeping the thing moving, and it almost feels like a stupidly protracted side quest. Sort of like Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery, but less of a stupid idea. But you know what the ultimate insult it is beyond the Dead Kings DLC being as boring as eggshell paint? There's actually paid DLC for Unity. I couldn't believe people were paying for additional costumes either, but that's no 2 shits Ubisoft for you. At least it's better than Revelations' Lost Archive DLC, but honestly, you'd have to be a fucking Steam derivative game to be worse than the fucking Lost Archive DLC. Thanks for coming in today, and here's the scoreboard. And the victory for gamers that I owe ya. Check back next time when we do something else that isn't Unity related.